While my uncle and his family took a European vacation, he asked me to take care of his home. My cousin and aunt had left ahead of schedule, and my uncle had to tend to some unfinished business. When he was done with his responsibilities, he asked me to look after the house for a couple of weeks. He was aware of my desire to try out life on my own for the first time and made this possible. He forbids me from having any visitors and from spending much time in the backyard. I wasn't sure why, but I figured he didn't want me venturing outside too often because of the dangerous accumulation of snow. He left me a lot of food in the fridge and detailed instructions on how to maintain the house. I'll admit that it started better than I had anticipated. Being by myself didn't bother me at all, and I had the distinct impression that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. Up until the middle of the night, when a noise woke me up, everything was running smoothly. I got up and looked around, more surprised than afraid. Nothing but the intense moonlight streaming into my uncle's room in the pitch black. When I went to check the weather outside, I saw that not only was snow falling, but it appeared to be a blizzard. I looked out the window, dumbfounded, having no idea what was happening. When I heard the same sound coming from the foyer downstairs, I quickly turned around. My heart began to race at this very instant. Something may have exploded against the door, or so I thought, but I couldn't be sure. I turned on every light in the house as I descended to the front door's peephole. After looking outside and seeing nothing, I opened the door a little, trying to keep the heat in and the snow out. Shocked, I followed the sound of feet to the door. I slammed the door and locked it, letting out a deep sigh of relief. Why would anyone be stupid enough to go outside in this? I muttered under my breath as I looked around the house as if trying to come up with a plan. I quickly made my way to the back door and peered through the pane. There was too much snow and darkness for me to see more than a few feet ahead of me, but I thought I glimpsed a tiny figure walking away from the house. It resembled a young child, perhaps 9 or 10 years old at most. For an instant when the wind died down, I could see clearly that there was indeed a child wandering around outside the house. I was frightened, and I worried about the little kid. I grabbed my phone and ran upstairs to report the kid hanging out by my house to the authorities. I waited by the back window, watching the snowy night for the kid to return, but he never did. When the police arrived, I briefed them on the situation in greater detail. A soft knock on the front door cut short our conversation as we stood in the kitchen. One of the cops told me to wait inside while the other answered the door. When the policeman opened it, it was the same kid from earlier. A concerned police officer brought the boy inside, even though he was only wearing a thin sweatshirt. The second officer opened the door, looked around for anyone else, and then went back inside. The child's face had a blank expression that was difficult to describe. The officer asked him numerous questions, such as where he was from and what he was doing, but the boy hardly answered any of them and appeared to be mentally disoriented. It was happening in front of me, but it didn't seem real, which added to the surrealism. What kind of kid decides to go out and play in the middle of the night during a blizzard? For what reason did he rap on the door? Why was he all by himself, his face blank? For weeks, we heard nothing. After he got back, my uncle didn't need me to keep an eye on the house anymore. The boy only spoke a few words, but he told the police he lived at my uncle's house, which is where I was at the time. 2 weeks after I found him, though, another family confirmed that he was indeed their long-lost child. My head was spinning from trying to keep up with the news, but bizarre developments kept happening. Not even a month later, while my uncle was once again on vacation, the body of another kid who had gone missing was discovered in the street in front of his house. There is no link between the two missing children, but it seems suspiciously coincidental to me. I started to wonder why my uncle didn't want any visitors and why he wanted me to stay out of the yard. Was he up to something I wasn't in on? He left several days after his family had already left. Why? Could he have hidden people away? I may be making too much of this, but who knows? 2 missing children were found outside my uncle's home. This may or may not be a coincidence, as the police checked the house after the first boy was found and my uncle cooperated with everything they asked of him. My favorite time of year is winter. The combination of snowfall and the holiday season never fails to put me in a cheery mood, but I do live in a state that gets a lot of snow during the winter, so that's a bummer. I had been working as a part-time DoorDash driver for almost 3 years, and I knew that this winter would be particularly challenging because it would take so long for the roads to be plowed, and then the heavy snowfall would cover them up again as soon as they were cleared. Even though it was risky and sometimes impossible to do my job, I frequently chose to drive when there was a lot of snow on the ground. Since no one else would be working, and since most other DoorDash drivers would probably be resting at home, I'd have a lot more orders to choose from and a better chance at making a profit. Customers who order delivery during a blizzard are aware that they are putting you out of business and will likely leave a larger tip as a result. A heavy snowfall night arrived in the middle of December, just as it had the year before. Due to my other commitments, I couldn't begin making deliveries until 7 or 8 in the evening, but as soon as I could, I hit the road. There were hardly any other vehicles on the road, and yet my DoorDash app kept sending me high-paying delivery requests. Before the snow got too bad, I was able to complete 2 orders in a reasonable amount of time and head back from a customer's home. Poor visibility was compounded by infrequent plowing. Even with all-wheel drive and snow tires, this snow was making it difficult to maneuver in my otherwise reliable vehicle. I came to a stop at a stop sign and could hardly get going again because my tires were spinning. After I'd finally crossed the street, my phone beeped with yet another order. For a split second, I debated whether or not to do it before deciding against it and dismissing the app. Even for me, the roads were too risky to travel on. The main part of town wasn't very far from the street I was on, so I just wanted to get as close to it as I could in the hopes that more snow plows had cleared the roads by then. I was going 20 mph in a 45 mph zone. Poor visibility meant I could only just make out the large object in the road's middle as I drove toward it. I slammed on the brakes because I didn't notice it until it was too late. Despite coming to a complete stop in plenty of time, my car was dragged off the road and into a deep snowbank by its sliding rear tires. Fortunately, the impact was relatively mild, but that didn't make me feel any better. My car was now completely mired in the snow, and I was going to need help getting it out. Staying composed, I turned on my hazard lights and got out my phone to contact roadside assistance. I told the man where I was, and he said he'd be there in 15 to 20 minutes. I concurred and thanked him enthusiastically. I leaned back in my chair, relieved that I hadn't accepted any orders, which would have only made things more difficult. Having watched the snowfall for a while, I eventually noticed a flickering light in my side mirror. It was faint, but I could tell it was an orange light slowly approaching me and flashing softly. It appeared to be a standard work vehicle as I got closer and saw that it was parked on the side of the road behind me. Considering it had only been 4 minutes since I called, this guy was extremely early. However, I wasn't about to complain that help had arrived so quickly. A couple more minutes passed while I waited in my car before I heard the door close behind me and saw a man approaching my window. When he was a safe distance away, I lowered it slightly. He greeted the man and asked if he needed help. "I did call you just now, a few minutes ago. I simply required assistance in getting back on my way," I answered, though it felt strange justifying my actions because the context was clear. "Correct. Let me investigate how I can assist you." The man circled behind my car and started looking at it, probably for a good spot to set up the hook. I have never done this before, but I guess that they use a winch to pull you out of your vehicle. I had no idea if that was actually what they did or where they attached it. I watched the man for a while, out of the car's rearview mirror as he waited. As soon as he opened the trunk, a blast of icy air shot through. When I turned around, he was looking around inside my car with the trunk propped open halfway. He mumbled an apology as he snapped the trunk shut. The fact that he opened my trunk at random was very strange, and I still had no idea how the process worked. There was no possible scenario in which he would require entry that I could think of. I became suspicious after realizing he had no idea what was going on. In a hurry, I dialed the number for roadside assistance once more. A few anxious rings passed as I waited for the same man to answer as before. Intestines sank. "Hey, I'll be there in a few minutes. Did you require further assistance?" he said on the phone. Just then, the man returned to my window, saying he needed my keys and asking me to step out of the car for a moment so he could get it ready. I awkwardly told the guy I needed a minute while on the phone while keeping the phone close to my ear. He said nothing, just watched me like he was interested in what I was saying, even though he was still standing next to my door. I was doing my best to remain calm. The window was rolled up by me. The man started aggressively knocking on the window and demanding to know what I was up to. When he heard that I had locked them, he tried to force open my door and started screaming at me. I was petrified because I knew I was trapped. A door slammed shut on the truck behind me, and I turned to see another man running towards my car, carrying an object. Then, from behind us, a blaring horn echoed, followed by flashing lights directed at my vehicle. As soon as they saw the roadside assistance vehicle, the two men sprinted back to their truck and sped off. Two men climbed out and came to check on me. The men overheard the situation because I'd left the call on and came to help. After reporting the incident to the authorities, I learned that several other incidents, very similar to mine, had occurred during periods of heavy snowfall. It is said that the men pose as roadside assistants and drive around looking for stranded motorists so that they can steal their vehicles and rob them. Without a shadow of a doubt, they were the ones who placed the large object in the road, causing me to swerve and lose control of the vehicle. Fortunately, things turned out the way they did, but I learned my lesson and will never drive in hazardous weather again. Following the incident, I became more cautious and now always verify the legitimacy of a roadside assistance service's credentials before accepting their assistance. I told my loved ones about it and warned them to be careful in the snow and to be wary of who they trust if they need assistance. I continued working for DoorDash throughout the winter, but I avoided driving in the worst of the weather. For the sake of a few extra orders, I was not willing to risk my safety. Instead, I concentrated on providing first-rate service when conditions were more favorable. This strategy netted me satisfactory tips and pleased the majority of my patrons. For a while afterward, I felt uneasy about the situation. I was left wondering how close I had come to serious harm, and this prompted me to exercise greater caution in several areas. However, I was also thankful for the divine protection that had been bestowed upon me. Passed and spring finally arrived after months of winter. With the arrival of spring, I was able to keep working my part-time DoorDash gig without any further incidents. The warmer temperatures were a welcome change, and I relished the opportunity to drive around town making deliveries without worrying about getting caught in a snowstorm. In retrospect, I see that I should have been more wary of the risks associated with winter, despite my undying affection for the season and all its enchanted beauty. I learned to trust my intuition when something didn't feel right and to pay attention to my environment. Long story short, I learned the importance of taking precautions and being well prepared, not just for the road, but for life. It taught me to be cautious even in what appear to be safe environments. Because of this realization, I am stronger and more deliberate in my choices. Over the years, I've told my tale in the hopes that it will serve as a warning to others. I stress the importance of being cautious in bad weather and of checking the credentials of anyone offering assistance on the road or in a dangerous situation. The terrifying experience was forgotten as time passed. Even as I marveled at the season's charms, I kept a wary eye out for danger. I kept working at DoorDash, and as the season progressed, I discovered new ways to enjoy it while remaining vigilant and alert. Because of this, the account of my spooky winter encounter is now a part of my life's narrative. It serves as a constant reminder not to take my own or anyone else's safety for granted, and to appreciate the comfort and safety that life provides, even in the depths of winter. When I was a kid, my family and I would take annual trips to the Arctic for ice fishing. My family had friends who owned some remote cabins, so we often spent family vacations there. A small gas station could be found within a mile. But from there, it would be another 20 to 30 minutes before you came across any other sign of life. It had started snowing on the way up, and all I wanted to do was get inside, set up my games, and relax. The trip would take us 8 hours, putting our arrival time at around 4 in the afternoon. The sun was beginning to set early because it was January, and I was feeling quite exhausted. We arrived at our cabin and immediately began unloading. Smart locks were installed in the cabins, so guests only needed the door's access code to unlock the door. I gathered my bags and went to punch in the code when I saw footprints leading up to the entrance. My dad heard about it and said it was probably the maid. After hearing this, I went ahead and opened the door. When I walked inside, I noticed there was water on the ground. I figured it was the maid service again. Aside from that, however, it resembled my memory perfectly. I checked into my usual room and began unpacking, but when I went to pull the blinds over the window, I noticed the tracks again. The snowfall indicated that they were coming from the woods and heading upwards towards our house. My dad heard about it and promised to look into it. However, by the time we had finished unloading, the snowfall had increased to a near blizzard. According to my father, intelligent life forms would not be present in the universe today. After eating some spaghetti and watching a movie with my mom, he put me to bed. A few hours later, I was awakened by what sounded like thumping on the wall outside my window. I attempted to return to sleep, but it kept happening. Eventually, I stopped being scared and became merely annoyed. I got up to see what was going on outside but saw nothing. The snow had stopped falling, making visibility better. However, I spotted the footprints once more, this time emerging from the woods at a location nearly identical to the first. Since I couldn't do anything about it, I locked the windows before returning to bed. My father seemed doubtful when I told him the following day. We investigated and found that someone had walked from the woods to our cabin, past my bedroom window, out the front door, and back into the forest. We've been here before, and we know that other than the cabin, there is nothing for miles, and that, especially in the winter, very few people ever camp here. My father informed his associates of the situation by calling them, but they were helpless to intervene. A few hours later, though, they brought over some small cameras that you plug into the wall, allowing you to monitor your home in real time. To help us feel more secure, we've installed them inside. It was an inconvenience, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. A few hours later, we headed out to the lake, but not before my mother made numerous checks of the security footage to make sure the cabin was empty. When we got there, we all put our phones on silent and fished for a while, without interruption. However, when we returned to the car, my mother found that she had received numerous alerts from the camera whenever it detected motion. In an instant, my dad had a friend check the cabin or get the authorities involved. While he went inside the house with a gun, his friend stayed on the line. After waiting for a while, he finally said, "There's nothing there." My dad's friends are a different breed, and I know he should have waited for the police. However, he decided to call the police and explain the situation. However, the low-quality cameras we used could only display a live feed and did not record anything. The next few nights, we stayed with a friend of my dad's, but the camera remained in the cabin. On the day we were scheduled to leave, it detected motion once more. My father and his friend hurried over, but once again, nothing was inside. However, this time I saw the same tracks from the woods leading to the cabin. My mother strongly discouraged my father from following the train's path. A stranger could have been lurking inside while we slept or watching us through the windows all day. It was one of the creepiest experiences of my life, but thankfully nothing ever came of it. Our subsequent visits, during which we stayed in a different cabin each time, were uneventful. They never did figure out what was going on, according to my dad's friend, and the person stopped coming after we left. As time passed, and we gradually forgot about the terrifying incident at the cabin, but it had a profound effect on all of us. We kept going to the northern cabins, but we were always on guard, making sure to take all the safety measures we could think of. Having the tiny cameras around gave us peace of mind and reassurance throughout our stays. They didn't catch any proof of the unknown visitor, but they did serve as a deterrent, allowing us to feel more secure on our travels. Over years, we've told our story to others as a cautionary tale about the need to be vigilant, especially in isolated areas. We warned our close friends and family members to use caution when traveling alone in remote areas and to always go with their gut. The memories of that unsettling time gradually faded as we continued to check out the cabins. We prioritized spending time in the great outdoors, doing things like ice fishing and hiking and creating new memories with our loved ones. Our trips north turned out to be times of bonding and relaxation, creating memories that we will always cherish more than our initial anxiety. The lesson we learned, however, was not to let our guard down, even in what may have initially seemed like a safe and familiar environment. My love of nature and exploration only grew stronger as I got older. The calm, peaceful atmosphere of the forest and the lake helped me relax. The cabins served as a refuge, allowing guests to get away from the city and into the motion-activated floodlights and high-definition security cameras with recording and storage capabilities were installed in the cabins by friends of my parents. These enhancements provided us with a higher level of safety and reduced our anxiety about intruders. We kept coming back to the cabins over the years, and thankfully we never had any scarier experiences. The cabins held a special significance for our family, providing a tranquil environment in which to reflect on and enjoy the wonders of nature. I learned from that frightening winter experience that safety and preparation are paramount, not just on wilderness expeditions, but in everyday life as well. Being alert and prepared for whatever comes can make a huge difference in the face of uncertainty. There are still many unanswered questions about the visitor in the woods. Nonetheless, we learned from it to always be on the lookout, to trust our gut, and to keep our distance from danger. When I think back on that terrifying experience from my youth, I am relieved that we were able to escape unharmed and that we did what we could to stay safe. It's a cautionary tale to help us remember to enjoy the wonders of nature and the thrills of life's adventures while keeping our guard up.